So the first thing you'll want to do is get your SD card in your card reader on your PC and then hop onto the official website raspberrypi.org. Now obviously I'll pop all the links that I talk about in this video in the description so you've got them easily accessible. But the official website is actually really cool. It gives you some of the current projects that people have got ongoing with their Raspberry Pis in their daily blog. I did mention before that a weather station is a pretty popular use for the Pi, and we've got one here about using a weather station in the school. And I was looking at this before, this is quite interesting. Emulation on the Raspberry Pi. Now that the Model 2 has got a bit more of a performance boost over the original, you can do some of the 5th generation consoles at full speed, stuff like the N64 and the PlayStation 1, so that's definitely worth a look if you're interested in some projects that you can use your machine for. But the bit that we want for this video is the download section. Now in here you can get operating system images that are officially supported by the Raspberry Pi Foundation. So if we look down, we've got the Debian Wheezy version that I mentioned before for ARM, the Raspbian port of that. OpenELEC, which is a version of XBMC, or Kodi as it's known now. There is an alternative one called RasBMC, but I actually prefer OpenELEC. I think it's a bit snappier actually, a little bit faster, more performance than that one. We've got a Fedora remix here, Pidora. There is RISC-OS, which is the old Archimedes operating system, updated for this. And now that the Raspberry Pi Model 2 is running on the ARM v7 architecture, there's actually a port of Snappy Ubuntu for it as well. So you can either download the individual images, but by far the simplest way of doing it is to get the noobs install. Now you can get this either by downloading a torrent or a zip file. I think it's around 700 megabytes, so really didn't take me all that long to download it. And then what you'll need to do is format your SD card. Now the most sensible way of doing this is to get a piece of software called the SD card formatter from the SD Association. Now what this will do, if you've ever used your SD card in another machine, it might be partitioned and there might be a part of it that Windows can't see, and you might end up only formatting part of the card. So a sensible way of doing it is to get the SD card formatter. Now I've got my 16 gig card already inserted into my card reader there, so it's detected it automatically. We'll click on format and that will give it a nice quick clean format there. As you can see, it's FAT32, 14.8 gigabytes available to use, so we'll close that down. And I've already downloaded the noobs install, so what you need to do is you need to unzip the contents of the noobs install onto your SD card. So I'll just quickly open that with my zip program. We'll pop that onto the SD card, which is K, there we go. And literally unarchive everything here to the root of your SD card. Give that a minute to copy everything over. There are quite a few files in here as well, and then you'll need your Raspberry Pi to be hooked up to Ethernet, and what we'll do then is install some operating systems from the list that it will give us when we boot the card. So the noobs install will let you install operating systems directly from your Raspberry Pi with this little SD card set up. So it's really a dead simple way of doing it, and it will also sort out dual booting and everything for you too. So I'll let these extract and then we'll hop onto the Pi and go through the install. Okay, so I've transplanted the micro SD card into my Raspberry Pi 2, and I've actually hooked up a USB mouse and keyboard, wireless actually via a little USB dongle, which as you can see has been detected automatically. Now when the noobs installer first loads up, a couple of seconds after it's partitioned the SD card for you, you'll be greeted with this little list of options of available operating systems that you can install from the noobs installer. Now at the time of recording this, as I mentioned, the Pi 2 hasn't really been out all that long, so I know there are a few on here that are incompatible with the Raspberry Pi 2. I did mention a little workaround to get OpenELEC working. However, upon rebooting, it looks like there is actually the Pi 2 version of OpenELEC, the port of Kodi Entertainment Center, available direct from the noobs installer. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Raspbian on here as well, the Debian Wheezy port I mentioned, and we'll also have OpenELEC Pi 2. So literally, it's a case of just highlighting the ones that you want to install. At the bottom it will tell you the amount of available space on your SD card and how much space you'll need to install the selected options. As you can see, we've got plenty of room on there. I mean, you can install a few more if you like. It's really dead straightforward. You highlight the ones you want, click install, it will give you that little warning, and then leave it 10 minutes and it will do everything for you. Partition the SD card, install the operating systems, and configure dual booting as well. So we'll leave that running and we'll come back to it in a few minutes. So here we are about 5 minutes later, and both of the operating systems have been installed. The Pi's rebooted itself, and now we're presented with the OS selection screen. Now you'll normally see this every time you power on your Raspberry Pi from cold, and it literally lists the two operating systems that we chose. So we'll try out Raspbian, the Debian Wheezy port. The machine will reboot itself one more time, and then we get this standard Linux boot screen here. Just kind of running through everything that the OS is doing as it loads up. All pretty standard. And then we get a few options that we need to set up on the first boot of Raspbian. So I will grab my keyboard here, and really the only thing I want to change at the moment is enabling the boot to the graphical desktop. So we'll use that one there, number 2. That should work fine. So we'll reboot the system again, and it should only ask this the first time that you boot up Raspbian. After that it should remember the configuration that you selected. You can always change it again later on, obviously, if you change your mind on anything. And when it reboots, you're greeted with this kind of colourful test screen, and then it should remember the last OS that you used and automatically select that within under 10 seconds or so. If you're impatient, you can give it a quick double click. That's quite useful for when it updates and does auto reboots. It should go into the last OS that you were using. And we did the configuration, the initial configuration of this OS already. So from now on, subsequent reboots and boot up should be a lot quicker than it was the first time round. As you can see, that did that in like 5 seconds or so. And then we get dropped into the Raspbian desktop here, which is a pretty standard looking ARM-based Linux distro. I did mention one of the main goals of the Raspberry Pi is to teach kids programming in an education environment, and because of that it does actually come bundled with a fair few coding and programming tools, as you can see from here. We've got some internet tools in here as well, pretty standard web browser.